Hello every folks, and good morning. Okay, so a little bit of an unexpected thing here today. Namely, it's the Halloween special and we're totally phoning it in. So, here's the thing. I ran into a bunch of random technical issues, so we're just kind of like winging it here today. I just wanted to do a kind of video on like the Wicce and everything you can do with pumpkins in general. Now, the original plan was to start off with going through everything you can do in RebornVision, and I had like a whole team set up for that and on the Vita that I thought was recently fixed up. And then it started running into a heating glitch over and over again, and so I thought I had that fixed, and I got it all reassembled, and, well, it kept running into said glitch. So I took it apart again, I, checked under all the heating shields and whatever else, and it turns out there was a crap load of corrosion that I ended up missing the first time around, because I figured, the shielding probably protected it. Honestly, probably shouldn't have assumed that. Anyway, so I got that all scrubbed out. I think I might have hit a fuse somewhere with a bit too much IPA along the way, because the thing didn't want to pop back to life after that, so I just kind of chucked it into a dehumidifier for a while, seeing if that'll end up sorting the problem, but still leaves us with the issue of, well, for the Halloween thing, we kind of wound up with, basically just doing this with whatever's on hand. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover all the different stuff that pumpkins have done in, well, the two games that most folks will end up playing. The old Know Your Unit episode on pumpkins still generally holds true as far as the March of the Black Queen, OB64, all of that kind of stuff. The only game they weren't in was Night of Lotus. But let's go ahead and cover how they function in Reborn as well as RebornVision. So we're actually going to start with OV here today. Simply put, because this was kind of one that I was hoping to do separately, because I wanted to start doing Know Your Unit for RebornVision now that we've gotten almost all of them done for Reborn. Don't worry, they will all be done. I get that comment every time. But first of all, I just wanted to point out something very funny. The Pumpkinhead actually gets a unique class in RebornVision, known as the Warden, which is kind of like it's sort of like a heavy variant. It's like a heavy familiar of sorts. But one thing I found particularly interesting is that Pumpkin Bomb is an ability that doesn't really change that much. Like a lot of the Pumpkin abilities, they're fairly locked in. The funny part is, when it comes to this move in particular, it actually scales with the Ogre Blade bonus. I actually didn't know that before. But anyways, let's go ahead and retreat out of this fight here and go over some of the other things that they can do. As you may notice, this actually allows for a Pumpkinhead with Rampant Aura, though the Pumpkinheads in RebornVision do also get a few other classes available to them as well. And in case you're wondering, I know this is a bit of a tangent here, but if you're wondering, like, hey, why is it that some stuff looks nicer and all of the rest of it looks like shit? Well, this is a weird issue that's currently going on with the Steam Deck version of the HD patch, where a lot of things have updated things that look better, and then a lot of the other things refuse to allocate correctly. And after speaking with the folks at the PPS's PP mod emulator, it turns out they may have potentially missed something when they updated all of the other versions to be able to work with this mod. So hopefully that'll end up being fixed down the line, but just so you know, that's why things look really weird and why I generally have not been covering a lot of RebornVision, as especially since the Steam Deck here, because this is the device I want to cover it on, either this or the Vita, and like all of the stuff with making it look nicer is functioning weird, because it looks like this game looks weird on emulator compared to something like the PS Vita, at least in my opinion. And the HD mod, it definitely fixes that, but yeah, as you can tell, like, some of the text is working, some of the icons are working, most of it isn't. The phone version had this issue, and the most recent patch fixed it. And then this is up to 16.6, which 15.6 was the point when they last had the issue, so it should have been fixed by now. Again, apparently just something got mixed in some text box somewhere. I have no idea. Anyway, let's get back to it. So, what exactly is this deal with pumpkins in RebornVision? Well, you have your selection of different things here. Instead of familiar, what they wound up with was a collection of the Amazon, the Valkyrie, the Terenius, and the Warden. And the Warden is basically like a mix of all of the above. It's kind of, sort of. The Amazon just gives them their wide weapon access. Valkyrie, typical Valkyrie versatility there. Get their guaranteed attacks, get their different spell options, support options, and what have you. Good defensive options, recovery options, all of that. Terenius, which the Terenius is actually probably going to be the second one that I want to cover for the Know Your Unit Reborn thing, because it seems like the Terenius has generally been kind of doo-dooed on a little bit in recent years, so just want to show some other stuff that you can do with it, and then let's go ahead and talk about the Warden. By the way, this video is very organized. Thank you for sticking by it. Anyway, so as far as skills, this is effectively the evolution of the Familiar in their case. You've got Pumpkin Bomb, which will get rid of, I believe that's 95% of their health in order to do void damage, which is basically like neutral damage. But you can scale this damage with the Ogre set, interestingly enough. Other than that, I'm not actually sure what it checks. I believe it's probably Strength, if I were to guess, but I'm not sure. Void is usually Strength, though, I think. Anyway. Pumpkin Pie is going to drop a shower of pumpkins, doubling their HP up to the maximum. Very useful healing move as long as you keep everybody's health up. It's basically the perfect top-up move, and then if their health is below half, it starts dropping off in effectiveness pretty sharply. Personally, I like having this. It's not a very time-consuming thing to move, sorry, not a very time-consuming thing to use, but it is pretty TP intensive. Still, pretty useful heal ability there. You've got Pumpkin Strike here that drops a leaden as well as a pretty decent bit of damage onto a target. Like most versions of the Pumpkin Strike, it's here to ground things. I've got the Crystal Pumpkin, which is an Exorcism Missile. The Jack-o'-lantern, which is here to serve as an obstacle, and also is meant to support the Witch, or the Wicce, by means of giving them an ability to restore their MP. Since the witch likes to eat pumpkins. Say what you will about, her swarm of pumpkin heads. Maybe there's more meaning there, but let's go ahead and move on. They can talk to other pumpkins. They get resonance skills, which are pretty handy. Basically, it just gives you an instill, but it's in an area. They've got absorb MP. They've got some reflect magic on there. Tactician 2, which, given the high intensity cost of their stuff, and given that they're not exactly a complete frontliner, like they have heavy equipment and everything else, but generally they seem kind of frail compared to a lot of other frontliners. So I would say Tac 2 is probably pretty handy in their hands, at least in my opinion. First rank of Field Alchemy, Siege is pretty handy on them for obvious reasons, since, they are technically a heavy lightweight unit of sorts. Again, personal opinion on that. And then you've got your standard collection of counters, bashes, clarities, wards, all of that kind of thing, but they do come with a Rampart Aura. Like I said, they're a bit of a mix of all of the above when it came to their class selections. They've got a little bit of casting stuff from the Valkyrie and the Terenius. They've got a little bit of the weapon access of the Warrior there. Kind of that kind of spread element flavor that the Valkyrie has for sure. And then as far as weapons go, again, I'm not actually sure if this is just as much as Warrior, but no, it's a little bit less. But they get fists, one-handers, axes, hammers, katanas of the two-handed variety, cudgels, sidearms, anatomy, and anatomy and teratology are not weapon skills, but they might as well be in their hands. Anatomy is pretty handy since it basically allows you to double up on a weapon skill. There's not many units that are able to use both anatomy and weapon skills at the same time. That is to say, most of them are, all of them are going to be non-human classes. But in the case of the Warden, this gives you, a handy unit for going and applying something like that. As far as their weapon options, they've got the full complement of fists. For the one-handers, looks like they get, no, they don't get everything. I think I was just being a little bit weird there. Okay, no, they do get everything. Basically, when I'm going and scrolling through this, you may notice occasionally, this seems to be a weird emulation thing, but it'll show the next option up, but grayed out, and that's kind of what I'm looking for. When you're playing it on original hardware, you don't have that. Again, there's a lot of little things that I prefer playing on something like a Vita for when it comes to this game. Anyway. So, carrying right along here, axes, they once again get the full complement there. Hammers, same deal. For the two-handers, no reason why they wouldn't. Cudgels, again, same. Actually, wait a minute, what was that? So they don't get two of them. They don't get the Life Giver or the Katfanga for some reason. I'm not entirely sure what that would be, but yeah, that looks like about that. And then for the longer range weapons, they have access to thrown weapons. Looks like they have access to to the throwing shield. I completely forgot that there was a throwing shield in the game. But yeah, it's a it's the Captain America shield. But we got a parry, stun, and a steadfast effect on the thing. I want to say this is... Wasn't this like one of the bosses in San Bronze that drops this these days? I'm planning to cover a whole lot more for One Vision, just kind of treating it as a new entry, going into everything here, just because it's been too long. It's been way too long. I want to get back into just like re-experiencing One Vision again. Okay, so that's all good there. Weapon access, they seem, or armor access, they seem to be locked into medium and heavy. So they don't get robes, they do get heavy armors, they do seem to get most arm guards, as well as, I think, yeah, most shoes as well. So just all medium and heavy options are available at their disposal, and obviously accessories aren't going to have too much of a thing. Now, what can you do with all of this different equipment? Personally, I just went for a bit of an ice theme on this guy, just a Rampart Aura in case you want to have them be a frontliner, Tactician for funding their skills, Pumpkin Bomb because I found it interesting that they could scale the Ogre set off of that, but let's make something a bit more interesting, because I feel like a Claw build would be a bit more appropriate for Halloween. So let's see, we got, you know what, Talons might be kind of fun. They actually, when it comes to the Ogre set, they actually can't equip the Ogre Shield. I forgot to mention that earlier. But something like an Evil Eye seems like it would be pretty appropriate for them. Come to think of it, I forget if Gorgon Shield... Let me double check something real quick, where it says Ogre Armor. Does it say Dark Magic Relic? No. I think that might be Dark Deed set. Yeah, there we go. Let's just go Dark Deed set on him, because they should be able to get all of that. I love that they added the description for all of that. So that'll give them Dark Deeds. I believe that still functions the same in OV. It's been a dang long while, but let's go ahead for something like that. Thinking something like this. Probably a Reaper Ring might be pretty legit, so let's go ahead and give that a bit of a try. I'll go ahead and put some claws on there, or fists, I should say. Let's see, we got our Pumpkin Bomb, we got our Resonance. Let's go ahead and switch this out for air. Go for a little bit of aerial resonance. Go ahead and augment air. Yeah, that's completely not the file that I had saved up, but dang it, we're just gonna make it work. We're just gonna wing this one entirely. As far as magic access, it's very similar to the Valk there. They get Sky Pillar here, so it's gonna remove 30% health from a single target and inflict bind. Let's see, that's really more on the Warlock side of things, so I believe the main difference magic-wise was that they get access to heavy debuffs, but they don't get access to the light ones or something. Like, let's see, we got this one, which they wouldn't be able to use, like Hover Draft is one of those ones that you would end up using on your Valkyries and such. Personally, one of my favorites. Just because you can instantly go and throw some flight on somebody, it's very, very handy. Whereas in this case, they would get Headwind, which the Valk would not get, in order to inflict slow instead. So either way, they're like an alternate version in that particular regard there. Similarly, though, they do have access to Scathe for the area hit spells there, and they have access to basic missiles. So again, kind of like I would say like a heavy Valk, heavy Rune Fencer kind of feel, as far as that goes. So that would be pretty fun there. I know I plan to at least run one of these on the next OV run, so we'll do that relatively soonish. I was originally planning to get all of that started. By the way, another fun visual glitch that's happening courtesy of the current Steam Deck situation with this game. But originally I was planning to get all of this restarted again with the One Vision Griffin only thing, because you know, we had original luck, and then the plan was to do vanilla, then do One Vision, then do Reborn, and still is the plan. It's just going slower than expected. But any dang ways, you know, courtesy of claws and everything else, their accuracy is not amazing. I probably would recommend using something like Feint on them, or Opportunist rather. So yeah, probably put Opportunist on there to help them out with their current accuracy situation. Let's see, they don't have any built-in ranged options, and let's see, as far as skills are concerned, yeah, Hobble, Frighten, Slow, Evil Deeds is still the same. So nice, fairly cheap thing on them. So I would say probably as far as this build goes, given their current setup, would probably swap out a few things. For one thing, Aerial Resonance, I can't imagine they'd be too much of a powerhouse because they're more defensive, and it feels like a lot of their damage would come from that Evil Deeds there, so probably would replace Aerial Resonance with something along the lines of actually, let's just go ahead and just do that right now. Probably replace that with a Opportunist. Could probably maybe throw a Siege on there if they're running Rampart already. They're not exactly, you know, moving around too much. You ideally would have them holding a position if running a more defensive loadout. So let's see what we can do here. So, aerial resonance, all well and good. Well, if we're combining this with counters, maybe not. In fact, let's probably replace Overpower with... what do we got bonuses on with these items right now? We can run Parry or Deflect with those bonuses. I would figure probably a Parry would be more effective since he's probably already fairly tanky against those casts anyway. Or, sorry, against the bows anyway. We've got our Air Magic on there. That, I mean, it's handy enough. Sky Pillar in particular seems like a solid anti-armor move. Let's see, we already have Siege on there. Do we... Well, we do want the Augment, that's for sure. I guess we could replace Tactician with a more or less equivalent thing with Counterattack instead. They get up to counter 2, so they're dealing 75s instead of 100s. So that could be fairly functional. This feels like it could use a little bit more tuning in terms of a build, but either way, this thing has options. We've got the Speed Star on there, we've got Stop, Fear, and Stone Ward. And Sleep Ward. This guy's immune to a absolute ton of things. We've got the Poison on hit, we've got the high defense, we've got the Fear coming out. Effectively, this is a just improved Terror Knight for all intents and purposes, because we got a poison weapon on the Terror Knight. It's a good time. It's a good time. Okay. So, with that being said, that's basically the Warden. It's a Warden. It's a very versatile unit. Personally, I would say, as far as their other classes go, they're here as an option, as a nice little taster test for what the Warden combines into one nice complete package. Alright, let's go ahead and move on to Reborn. Alrighty, so let's go over to Reborn real quick and talk about how they changed the class here. So, in PSP, they were limited to Songstress and Familiar. In Reborn, they got the addition of Berserker here as well. So we're going to go through them in, well, kind of right to left order, because reasons. Let's go ahead and kind of do the whole thing here. So, first of all, with the Familiar, this is going to be one of those classes that switches depending on who's using it. So in this case, the Pumpkin version is going to have a lot of Pumpkin-related things here. So they've still got their Crystal Pumpkin here as the ability to be a Exorcism Missile of sorts. They've got an AoE in the form of Sporogmos. This is an ability that was both on the Familiar and Rogue back on PSP, essentially being an ability that slaps in an AoE with an air effect. Now, if you're using this on an air unit, it's going to be a kind of noticeable chunk better. However, this is one of those skills that's very dependent on cards. So, for example, if you pick up a couple Fizz Up cards and a crit card, it can actually be absolutely devastating. But in its neutral form, it's mostly a stiff breeze. But yeah, you pick up the right cards, this thing will shred like nobody's business. So yeah, their skills are very dependent to some degree on cards. Pumpkin Strike is going to be crushing damage in a small area by dropping a pumpkin. Good for dark element units, though the Familiar can't become dark or light, so that's a bit of a thing. I've been told by some people that they found ways to make them dark or light. I haven't seen it, so if you happen to know of how to make a dark or light pumpkin, if you can prove this, please do let me know. Anyway, just go ahead and show this. If I happen to have any of those charms, yeah, you can't make them light, and kind of dark is the same shtick here. So these are mostly here. They're going to basically they're going to hit better against light units when it comes to this one, as well as I believe this is the one with the leaden effect still. So Pumpkin Strike is going to drop flying targets. So weirdly enough, it's good as a Angel Knight hunting move. Of all things, but being what's technically classed as a skill here, it's going to check Mind for its ability to hit. You're not going to learn the odds of what that ability are, and it is unaffected by Spell Strike powder. So this is going to be something that'll be fairly handy for taking out Angel Knights if you've given them some Mind boosts. Now, given the fact that they're a Familiar, they can go and stack a bunch of equipment that will give them those Mind boosts. For example, Arcatros Mitts, the Worm Scale actually has a pretty decent Mind boost on there. And additionally, you've got the Wizard Hat here that'll give you a 9 boost to it, but if you're feeling a bit more defensive, you can go for Circlet. Typically, in most cases, Wizard Hat will do the job. Anyway, so, continuing on, you have Pumpkin Pie, which is one of my personal favorite moves in the game. Why? Because it absolutely sucks, and it's just funny. It just rains pumpkins down from the sky like it always has done. However, unlike the different versions of it throughout the series, it is basically intentionally terrible this time around. You're spending 35 MP for a locked-in 65 health heal. You may notice that's not very much. Now, that being said, I always keep it on their list whenever I'm running familiar, and strangely enough, it actually has saved people a few times, just because of how cheap it is, a combination of meditate, and if you're using them as a physical attacker. Personally, I was using them as a blowgun unit or a dagger unit, but you can absolutely go staff and short bow on something with something like the familiar, which, like for example, if something's defense is broken, way down over there, maybe your spellcasters can't reach them, but a bow absolutely can. The elemental short bows have proper longbow range, and they're going to have very good damage if something's defenses are penetrated in any way. So those are a very handy tool to have. So yeah, we definitely say that it's something that they can regularly fund. It's weird that this is as useful as it has been, because it's not even relatively quick to use. So it's basically the equivalent of just using a 75% heal item or something, but yeah, locked in 65 health heal. This is the meme heal of this run, or of this game, and I personally just am absolutely here for it, but you do you, Then if you want to have them self-destruct, you have the Pumpkin Bomb, and this actually does apparently seem to scale off of weapon skill as well as having the right element, and off of Strengthen and off of Empower. So this is going to be potentially very useful. It's going to absolutely self-destruct the user. It doesn't do the whole 95% health thing that VicariousVision does, so you're better off trying to get as much damage out of this as possible. And if you're curious, yes, you absolutely can zombify the familiar and use them as a renewable one-way trip explosive. So there's that too. That being said, it's also fairly cheap to actually bring online this time around, so something to bear in mind. Now, the last of their unique abilities here is going to be the Pumpkin Lure. This is something that the other familiars can use as well. Now, this basically says that they act as a decoy and makes them more likely to be targeted. It's unclear how well this works. I know it works very consistently against somebody like Dorgalawa, where you can regularly put them inside of a bundle of dragon scale dragons and just laugh as he self-destructs himself. But the AI has a lot of different priorities when it comes to targeting things, so this is one of those it seems pretty likely to work kind of situations, but you don't always know for sure that it's going to work against everything. But just so you're aware, that is a thing. So if you're, like, let's say, running a situation where you want to create that renewable explodey Gourd situation, let's say we go ahead and we give them their self-destruct here. We go ahead and we give them something like a resistance to petrify, so the chickens don't get to them, because, that would not be good. And insight. Now, here's the thing. Personally, I would recommend something a little bit different from the usual setup of doing the zombie thing, because as good as the zombie can potentially be, they're slow. Like, they are slow to get back up on their feet. They have to spend an entire turn to get themselves going again. So what I would instead recommend is just essentially going for something like this. Like, let's say you take something along the lines of a status effect blowgun, right? Go ahead and give them their shield. We don't need insight on there because it does not cost much to bring Pumpkin Bomb online. You give them a plume, you leave them at their normal health, you go ahead and give them something like a BOS, maybe any other support abilities you want to bring with you. If they're running enough mind or whatever else, give them some other abilities. If they see that they're not going to have a good opportunity for their self-destruct, they can always spell charge into somebody else to get themselves back up on their feet, potentially. Some other debuffs in case you feel like it. And go ahead and throw on a few more plumes here, and then you put them next to a warlock. So the warlock will give them their empower, they put on their plume, and then they go ahead and they try to find a position there. Now, the reason they want to leave them living as opposed to letting them die is that in this particular version, you always get an instant turn as soon as you're revived. Seeing as even the worst revive brings you back with 10%, their 386 MP here would be more than enough for them to come back with the ability to automatically self-destruct again. Now, they wouldn't be empowered, they wouldn't have their plume up, so essentially they could have a setup phase, they could have a normal phase, but if you just wanted to repeatedly self-destruct them, you would switch them over to a fire element, you would leave them within range of a cleric, go ahead and speed boost that cleric, maybe spell charge into them if they don't have a good opportunity to do stuff, and then just repeatedly send them in and, self-destruct, get brought back, immediately self-destruct again. Just kind of weaponize the pumpkin for the purpose of the cleric. Alright, so that's about that. This is a very flexible class. It's got a lot of offensive options. It's got a lot of support options. It's got a lot of poisoning and stuff like that options. It can heal. It can debuff. It can support. It can buff. It's got a lot of different things going for it. This one is built like a trickster. You should play it like a trickster. If you are looking to keep them in the fight a bit more often, probably keep something like Meditate on there. Could be pretty handy. The reason that I put Petrify on there, as I mentioned earlier, around the time when you're getting these guys is also around the time that you have to start really worrying about cockatrices. Resist Petrify isn't going to guarantee that you're not getting petrified, but if you're running a unit that's going to be kind of right in the middle of things, it's at least worth throwing that on there. Anyway, let's go ahead and move on here. So next up on the list is the Songstress. The pumpkin version of the Songstress is the same as any other version of the Songstress. They have instruments, and they go ahead and they hit things. Now, that said, as I have mentioned in previous things, the combination of hammer and instrument is actually going to give you pretty much coverage for every element, so potentially very useful stuff there. Just because you've got water from this, you've got air from this, and then if we go over to the hammers right quick, I'm sure I've got somebody running hammers in this direction. We've got ice, we've got fire, we've got lightning coming off of those. So that's going to give you a solid bit of options against everything. I believe the final one might be Divine, if I'm not mistaken. I apologize, I'm very tired today. I might be missing a few things. It happens. Anyway. As far as spells go, seeing as they would be locked into a fairly awkward weapon combo, I would probably recommend probably putting some of their better dances on there. Though, interestingly enough, I apparently don't have... Where is it? Where's the renewing one? Anyway, Poised Arabesque, you know, pretty useful one to start off with. It's going to give you health and MP. This is actually, I believe, no, that's the Ardent Conga. Ardent Conga will already give you MP. So Arabesque is just good as a general recovery thing. Conga will give you Spellcraft as well as MP. Now, you're already getting that for free off the Pandero. Usually, you don't need more than 5 to kind of get the momentum rolling. I apparently don't have Escalating Sanit on here, so you probably want Escalating Sanit. Stirring Full Core... Okay, this one has a niche use if you're running a lot of Swordmasters, because Healcraft does actually apply to Swordmasters. Multiple Swordmasters could potentially get some pretty decent returns off of something like a Harvest Dance. I've done it before. It's extremely niche, but could be potentially just what you're looking for under some very specific boss circumstances. Personally, I found that handy in San Bronza, where there were certain cases where units were moving very fast, and one way to potentially deal with that was more or less a heal blender of 3 Swordmasters. It's kind of having them dance around, give them Healcraft, and then repeatedly have a combination of the Songstress as well as those guys, just throwing out a bunch of trickle heals. Now, in that particular case, Yuria was still alive. She's currently dead on the save file, but at the time I was also throwing in that pumpkin heal, which is one of those 3 times that I found that it was helping stuff. So either way, something to potentially consider. Taunting Mambo is probably the most useless thing in the game. You'll pretty much never need Stagger, and Weaken, however, the Weakening Jirapo could be handy if their mind is high enough. That one's kind of circumstantial. Unfortunately, a lot of the time when you're running into a lot of these abilities, they tend to be kind of sold badly, as it were. By the way, if you have Escalating Sanit, definitely keep this on here for doubling duration. But typically, when you're running into post-game and you're running into harder and harder post-game enemies, it can be hard to value a class that's running a lot of mind checks when you suddenly have reached a far higher threshold for those to matter, you know? So that being said, you know, it's a good thing. Again, instruments are kind of slept on in terms of having really, really exceptionally good finishers. Most of them are in an AoE, like an immediate AoE, and they're of unusual elements, so they're very handy in that regard. Alright, and then lastly is one that we already partially covered, and that's going to be the Berserker. Now, we've covered the Berserker before, however, Pumpkin Berserker is a little bit different in that they basically can get additional stuff on there. So, I believe it was Berserk and Empower that are unable to stack with each other, that they overwrite. However, that being said, this could potentially allow for a better single-hitter Berserker, as you get your Empower for, I believe that's 50% rather than the 30% from Berserk. You get your Sanguine for another 50%, something like Risk Management to keep him safe, something like Pincer to put him in a good position, something like Constitution to make him a bit more tanky or what have you. But additionally, this is a class that gives the Pumpkinhead in general just a bit more utility in terms of being able to train them as a Berserker early, giving them a bit more of a health boost over time, seeing as the Familiar and Songstress are going to be fairly low in terms of their overall health pools. Granted, you don't really get Pumpkinheads that early. There's very few. Hell, I think the earliest you can maybe get one is in the 30s from Deneb's side quest, if I'm not mistaken. Could be wrong on that, but either way, you're not really going to get a ton of levels to take advantage of that health boost, but technically that optimization option is there. Alright, and then lastly, finally with all of that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the Wicce, which I probably should have covered the OV version of for, or also, but I didn't. Let's go ahead and move on. Okay, so this is not how the Wicce usually looks. Let's go ahead and swap her out for her actual thing here. So the Wicce in Reborn has seen not so much changes, like they've technically gotten a bunch of improvements to a lot of their stuff, and at the same time their situation has gotten a little bit worse. So let's go ahead and talk about this here. For one thing, before we go anywhere, this right here. They've got one of the most broken combinations in the game in the form of meditation and whips, as well as, just like everybody else, having access to the Stinky set. So if you ever want to see something completely stupid, what you need to do is put Stinky set on there, put whips, put meditate, and then just kind of the rest can be whatever. Now, she can take better advantage of this than pretty much anywhere else, because she's got Witch's Smile to be able to inflict even more crazy stuff on there. And on top of that, we can go ahead and, I guess we might as well put Magic Time, or we can put this. It's up to you, really. We'll slot that out in a moment. Now, the reason that this is absolutely insane is because now she is effectively invisible. She basically will approach stuff at close range in order to, to repeatedly one-shot them with things like Armageddon. Now, that being said, she recently died on the save file, so that's why I was training her up as a Fusilier for no apparent reason. But you now have this unit that's able to charm units while also one-shotting units, while also potentially being a pretty useful spellcaster. Now, in her case, usually I would recommend something more along the lines of debuffs. She has the ability to get concentration basically through Magic Time. Spellcraft is a lot weaker than it used to be in previous versions. Not necessarily because the buff itself is that much... It's basically better technically than before, but its overall effect is less noticeable this time around. See, in PSP and One Vision, the reason Spellcraft mattered was because it improved your kind of penetration potential with the spell. It was getting past more defenses. This time around, its damage is increased, but its penetration was already there. The main reason that magic is seen as like this overpowered thing is because it doesn't technically go up very high in terms of its number. Like if we go overhead and take a look right here, we see that even her ranged attack, technically speaking, is only like 100 less with a throwing rock than it is with magic there. But the magic is, functionally speaking, not really resisted by anything. So it doesn't necessarily go as crazy high as everything else, but it also doesn't have to worry about defenses. It's a very consistent but fairly low option. So the other stuff can outperform it if the right things are applied. Now, in her particular case, because she'll be running Meditate and Whips and what have you, mostly what you want to worry about with her is going to be Control. So personally, I would say something like Petrify, Sleep, Spell Charge in case somebody needs it, and then Slow for the purpose of putting somebody kind of out to the side there. Sure, you can put heavier options on her, and if you'd like, you can switch over to Apocrypha in terms of this stuff here. So if she ends up doing well enough, you switch over to into a Spellcraft boosted Aeroflux. It's pretty good. Now, is it going to be anywhere near the performance of something like a Ice Lich running Nature Power? No, not even close. But still, it's potentially an option. But this allows her to potentially, save up for a splash later, while constantly spamming Armageddon through Meditate, while getting free charms off with Wicce's Smile. The Wicce is in many ways stronger than it's ever been in this version, by quite a long ways. It's just that most of the time folks will look at her in terms of just being a spellcaster and wonder, like, why would I care? Like, she's a spellcaster that basically is missing a lot of the big powerhouse moves that a lot of the others get. So why does this matter to me, Which is understandable. However, she's basically more of a close ranger this time. Again, remember her history as a character. She's not exactly somebody that's been shy from, getting hands-on, as it were. She's one of those characters that's consistently been up in everyone's face, and also doesn't seem to have many qualms about decapitating random villagers for the purpose of giving herself a bunch of gourds that ended up going and creating a labor union. Like, this is a character that likes to get up close and personal, likes flirting with people, and so you give them their proper kinky setup. You get them their whip, you get them their smile, you get them their explosions, their ability to bind stuff in place, as it were, their boots here, and then you get them their greasy ring, which they're definitely gonna use for non-nefarious purposes. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of about that. She's more of a hybrid melee weird kinky powerhouse than an actual spellcaster this time around, which is pretty cool. I think that's cool. I like these kinds of builds, essentially everything to do with the pumpkins and the Wicce and stuff like that. It's just a fun little circle of different hybrids, which I found pretty fun. So yeah, that's about that. Personally, I would say if you ultimately, many classes will benefit from the Stinky set. I feel like hers is probably just beating out the Dark Priest in terms of being able to take the most advantage of it. The Dark Priest gets better defensive options and can go for more of a caster orientated approach. Essentially, their big debuff thing comes in their off turns. In her case, she wants to be a bit more proactive about it, and I would generally say that you want to put her into more dangerous positions, and she doesn't really have the defensive options to necessarily kind of support that outside of the Stinky set. You can do the usual, get some Garbus Sages, get the crown and stuff like that kind of situations. But either way, that's only going to help so much. Even the armor by itself has a higher defensive rating than many of those other options, and they don't get access to a lot of the heavier ones. Something like the earthen boots here are probably going to be one of their better defensive options. Still, all the same, I would say Stinky set is probably best reserved for the Wicce, running whips, meditate, Witch's Smile, and a lot of the other stuff that they like to keep everybody locked down and under control. Alright, that's all I have time for here today. Thank you guys for stopping by. And sorry again that this was a bit of a haphazard one. Once I can get everything sorted out, we'll be back on track. But time's going to be a bit limited for, for the immediate future. Alright, y'all take care.